For roughly 3 months, it was poured into the Gulf, chemical dispersant that BP and Coast Guard officials call an effective tool in fighting the oil spill. Congressman Ed Markey calls it carpet bombing of the Gulf and says BP abused its permission to use the dispersant.
BP, for all intents and purposes, sprayed just about every single day. And on some days, they did so in quantities which were far in excess of anything that reports that they were giving to the Coast Guard indicated that they were using.
But Markey also says the Coast Guard was rubber stamping BP's actions, often letting the company use what he calls excessive amounts of dispersant. From the end of May, if BP wanted to use the chemicals, it had to ask the Coast Guard for a waiver which Markey says was granted almost indiscriminately, averaging more than one a day. And according to a letter from Markey to Incident Commander Thad Allen, on many of these days, BP still used more than double its new 6,000-gallon limit. Asked by CNN about Markey's charges, Allen said he always consulted with the EPA on giving BP permission to use dispersants, but his frustration was clear.
Folks are managing these conditions on scene tactically and have to make decisions without complete information, sometimes under conditions of uncertainty, because we have never used dispersants at this level before. That was done, and to the extent that there's an issue about it, I'm the National Incident Commander and I'm accountable. Next question.
BP says it worked closely with Allen's command and the EPA. The company says it didn't hide anything, and dispersants prevented a bigger disaster.
These are all trade-offs, and one of the things we didn't want to see happen is you all reach the shoreline, and dispersants were effective in that.
But what about damage below the surface? The EPA now says the dispersants mixed with oil were no more toxic than the oil itself, and says there's no indication of wildlife sickened or killed by dispersants. But Jackie Savitz of the environmental group Oceana, who's set to testify before Congress about dispersants, says that doesn't give the full picture. Do you think it is being incorporated into the food chain? Do you think it's getting to the larvae and other things like that?
Well, we're starting to see signs that it is getting into things like crab larvae, and that's really important because those are important food for other fish, but they're also the stage that has to happen before we get crab adults.
An EPA official we contacted disputes that, saying the agency has no evidence so far that any traces of the dispersant have crept into the food chain. Brian Todd, CNN, Washington.